So I thought I'd try out a Nano Cortex. So something I thought I'd do, which makes this really portable and easy to move around, is using a USB power bank, a simple USB power bank, and then one of these cables that does USB to 9 volts. I'll put a link in the description to the one I'm using. Basically it outputs USB to 9 volts, 1 amp, and this takes 600 milliamps, so there's plenty of juice to power something like this. And then I can use this sort of like Ghostbusters style. You know, I could put this together with my load box and then go to different places and basically profile amps on the go. So this is one of the easiest capturing devices I've used so far. So compared to say Tonex or NAM, this kind of takes the cake. I mean, it's an all-in-one device and I'm hooked up to my VHT Deliverance 60 here. So we're using the Suhr Reactive Load to take a signal out of the amp, and then we're using the Nano Cortex to capture the various signals. What's really interesting here is that there's actually only around 50 seconds where the Nano Cortex, it sends out like bleeps and blops and like the signals to the actual amp itself. And then the rest of the time is actually spent doing the profile training, to use that term, on the Nano Cortex to put the profile together. And that kind of differs to say Tonex and both NAM. So NAM, for example, it has a 3 minutes, 10 seconds signal that it sends out to the amp and then uses that to capture. Tonex, it takes around, I think, 4 minutes, 40 seconds. So it sends out signals for 4 minutes, 40 seconds to the amp before then starting the capture. So there we go, took around 3 minutes, 40 seconds. So yeah, let's see how that sounds. So what I find really cool here is that the actual profile itself is really dynamic. So I get the same kind of dynamics that I'm getting out of the amp. And then when you're adding more gain, I can get a more gained up version, almost like, you know, I'm pushing a boost into the front, but I'm getting more gain and saturation from the actual profile itself. And I must say, they've done that really well. I don't feel that, you know, it's the actual amp per se that I'm really pushing the gain, but I'm getting more saturation. And especially out of an amp like the VHT, which is, you know, really kind of dry in nature, especially at the settings that I have. Getting that kind of saturation from a profile, admittedly, it's not the actual amp itself, but having that level of control and getting that kind of response out of something that's really easy to control is really cool. One of the reasons why I was interested in getting this was as like a backup for my main pedalboard, so the FM3, and also maybe something I can use in rehearsal. The thing is, it really depends on use case scenario, but I do see some things that for me make it really hard to properly integrate in either an existing setup or something else that you're going to be using without incorporating external pedals. One of the main ones is like lack of tap tempo, which I'm sure will come to the device at some point, and also how the MIDI is implemented at the moment. We've got this expression MIDI jack that's at the back here. So using a TRS jack, we can put MIDI into the device. So you can use, say, a MIDI controller, such as Morningstar or something like that, and then go from a TRS jack into here, and then you can easily switch between presets. You can only switch between presets. There's no CCs for dialing in, you know, different amounts of mix for your delays, or even changing the tempo because it doesn't accept MIDI clock. And what would have been really cool, I think, here, instead of this combo jack, so either expression input or MIDI, would have been, say, a MIDI mini jack input, or even a normal MIDI input, so that you'll have a separate MIDI slot that you can connect your MIDI controller to, or even your laptop, and then a separate expression input so that you can control the volume on there. As there's no MIDI CCs to do that, you're stuck with either, well, you know, change presets, or have an expression pedal that's changing the volume. I find that quite limiting. So it also doesn't have tap tempo. I presume that's something that will come eventually in an update, but that means that, you know, to get delays that are synced to a certain BPM, you've got to look up the amount of BPM to milliseconds, if that makes sense, and do the conversion yourself, and then have different presets that will be set up to be the specific delay times for, say, different songs that you're playing. I would really hope that they incorporate MIDI clock at some point, because being able to just send, say, a MIDI clock, so a BPM into something like this, would make that whole process a lot easier. So obviously you can add in other pedals to make up a different kind of pedal board and set up a tone with this being sort of like the brains of the operation, being your core amp tones, and then add in other pedals after and before to sort of have a different setup or a backup setup. So this is where something like Tonex sort of comes into the equation, or at least talking points, in that if I'm using this on a pedal board as like the core amp tones and using pedals before and after that, I could also use something like Tonex, which is, or Tonex 1 in this case, which is even smaller. And if I'm using that for core amp tones, you know, I'm gaining extra space and it's serving the same purpose, of course, at a lot lower price. Now, a lot lower price in that this costs 170 odd euros. This is 550 euros. However, this can capture whatever it is that I want to capture and also set up the tones in an all-in-one unit. And that's something that only this does. So in any case, I hope you got something out of that. If you like this kind of content, please drop a like and subscribe. And if you're interested in checking out some other videos I did on capturing tone, you can check out the playlist here for videos on Tonex as well as NAM.